This morning in Israel was tough. A car pulled to the side of a country road. A man got out of the car. When another car approached, he raised his gun, he aimed at the passengers, and he pulled the trigger. Another car came. He looked at the car, and he fired a gun. A bus. He fired again. He got back in his car and he drove away. 3 people were murdered in cold blood, innocent people. 8 more were injured. This would be a top story anywhere in the world, but this was in the Cimmerian Hills, the northern West Bank. That's why you haven't heard about it. They were murdered for one reason, for being Jewish. For decades, Palestinian TV and schools have been inculcating this hate, this Jew hatred. They told this terrorist his entire life, slaughtered the Jewish people. If you're caught, the supposedly moderate Fatah-run Palestinian government, which is part of the Palestinian Authority, they'll pay you, and they'll pay your families forever. This is called pay for slay. This is the same murder mindset that led to the October 7th massacre. As long as Palestinian society praises murder, terrorists will keep coming, and Israel will do what it needs to do to guard its citizens against these murderers. Isn't that what anybody would do? Now imagine this. A Hezbollah fighter is filing legal cases against Israeli soldiers. Yes, I know it's hard to believe, but you heard me correctly. Brazil just ordered a war crimes investigation into an Israeli soldier. Who is this soldier? He's a hero who survived the Nova massacre on October 7th and went on to fight the Hamas terror group in Gaza. Now he's being hunted in courtroom. And it's not just Brazil. Soldiers who fought Hamas since October 7th are being targeted in 11 countries: Sri Lanka, Thailand, Belgium, the Netherlands, Serbia, Ireland, Cyprus, and Morocco, and the list goes on. And who's behind these legal cases? A group called Hind Rajab Foundation, founded by Diab Abu Jaha. Who is Diab Abu Jaha? This is a terrorist who admitted to joining Hezbollah and fighting Israel in 2006. How do we know? He bragged about it to the New York Times. The New York Times quoted him. They said he joined the Hezbollah resistance against Israel. And quoting him, he said, "I had some military training and I'm still proud of that." So Abu Jaha is a proud terrorist of an internationally outlawed terror organization that has claimed the lives of hundreds of people, thousands of people, including more than 200 Americans in Lebanon. He even lied about breaking ties with Hezbollah to get asylum in Belgium, which considers Hezbollah a terror organization. The Israeli government exposed him for organizing Hezbollah tours. Where? Not in Lebanon. Hezbollah tours in the heart of Europe. So let's be clear. He is a terrorist. These cases are not about justice. They're not about law. They're about terror. Ironically, Israel's soldiers are being hunted in European courts. Israel soldiers defend us in Israel from murder. The terrorists want to murder us. So now those same terrorists who are losing on the battlefield in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Yemen are weaponizing courts around the world to target our soldiers. Why are they doing this? Because they want to stop Israel from defending itself so they can carry out more massacres like October 7th. The terrorists filing these cases are the same people who are trying to murder us. They're just now trying to murder us by detaining our soldiers in courts so they cannot defend us. We have to stand with our soldiers, because without them, who stands between us and the next attack? Hamas is leaking hostage information, but rejecting a hostage deal. Recently, a list of 34 hostages rumored to be freed in the deal's first stage was published in the Saudi news outlet Asharak. BBC also received a list. They said Hamas shared with them 34 names also, including children, 10 women, and 11 males between the ages of 50 and 85. The report added that it didn't know how many of the freed hostages, those who were supposed to be freed, are even still alive. Israel's government said that this list is based on something it gave to Hamas months ago. Hamas never approved the list. However, they were leaking it to the press. Last week, Hamas said they would only provide a list of living hostages after a ceasefire. So Israel's government has said Hamas has returned back to demanding that we end the war before getting our hostages back. And Hamas is requiring that we release some of the bloodiest murderers from Israel's prison. Hamas is demanding Israel capitulate without even releasing the hostages so that it can continue to hold on to the hostages for insurance while doing what? What they've always said they were going to do. Plan more and more October 7th. I want to be very clear. There have been numerous hostage deals. Hamas has rejected every single hostage deal. Don't take my word for it. US Secretary of State Blinken just said what we've seen time and again is Hamas not concluding a deal that it should have concluded. Does anyone think that Hamas wants to release the hostages? Israel wants a deal to bring our people home. Those who are suffering in Hamas terror dungeons, and we want to bring them home today. We also want a deal that won't allow Hamas to revitalize itself and kidnap more hostages and attack more Israelis tomorrow. Israel wants a deal that will not allow Hamas to continue to execute more innocent people ever. The war that Hamas declared on the people of Israel cannot end with Israeli hostages in Gaza and Hamas on its feet. Let's now take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Doron. Our first question comes from Lisa. Do we know what can be done about these lone terrorist attacks all over Israel? It seems like no one is safe.
Lisa, thank you for your question. As painful as this is, and we mourn and send our deep, 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 heartfelt condolences to these families who've lost 3 people this morning. It is absolutely a tragedy. In fact, most of Israel is safe. There are numerous terror attacks that Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are constantly planning and trying to carry out, not only in Gaza, but also throughout Judea and Samaria, where there are Israeli civilians that are innocently driving to work and going to school. That's what these people were doing this morning. When a Hamas terrorist got on a road, he's not trying to kill a soldier or anyone that's armed. He's killing an innocent civilian. We stopped the vast, vast, vast majority of terror attacks. Israeli forces are operating inside Judea and Samaria, just like we're operating inside Gaza, to flush out the terrorists that are carrying out global terror, Islamic terror, the same terror that Al-Qaeda carries out, with the same exact ideology. Instead of attacking Americans on 9/11 in New York, they're trying to attack Israelis deep within our cities. This is an ongoing battle. This is something Israel is making enormous progress on. Unfortunately, today, we didn't act in time, but Israelis know that Israel has an incredible army, an incredible police, and that we're managing to stop most of these attacks, and will continue going after these murderers until there is no threat to Israeli civilians. Thank you for your question.
Our next question comes from Instagram. After the ISIS attack in New Orleans over New Year's Eve, do you think the West and the world will wake up to the threat of radical Islamists like Israel is dealing with?
This is, of course, an example of what happened in New Orleans of terror. Doesn't see Israel, it doesn't see any individuals of the United States. Terror makes no distinction. Terror and these international terror regimes are against something we all have in common, which is freedom. They are against freedom because they are seeking tyranny and domination. And therefore, they attack Israel and they attack New Orleans. I think many people in the West are awake, not everyone. And I think that the US needs to be much more vigilant in understanding that the same terror that we're facing in Gaza and in Lebanon and by the Houthis, we just happen to be the first stop on the way. But the terror train is heading towards the United States and heading towards Europe. And this is an example where we can see if we are not vigilant and if the world is not united in understanding that there is no difference between ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran, then we're not going to succeed. We need to unify in fighting terror together. And I hope that this message will be taken by our dear friends in the United States, and I offer my condolences to those families.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Adam on Instagram. Do we know what the basis of the jurisdiction is for these prosecutions of IDF soldiers around the world, and what can be done about it?
Adam, thank you very much. Well, this is a clown's court. These are trying Israeli soldiers based on nefarious reports that are being brought by a Hezbollah terrorist. And so the jurisdiction, many of these countries have different jurisdictions. They're not all part of the EU. They're not all part of the ICC. What this is this is a claim without any basis that is being brought to litigators that have anti-Israel settlements that are filing these individual cases in these countries. Each one has its own issues. The Israeli Foreign Ministry, of course, is trying to tackle this on a country-by-country level. However, and I appreciate your question, there needs to be absolute outcry against the absurdity that a Hezbollah terrorist that lied in order to receive citizenship in Belgium is filing a case against an Israeli soldier who entered Belgium and many other countries legally. This needs to fill the papers. This needs to be brought to the EU, to the United Nations, to stop the insanity, to stop the upside down situation where Israelis are being charged for the acts that the people who are charging them are actually doing. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Instagram. Do we know how the Israeli government is responding to Blinken's admission that Biden's actions have led to Hamas pulling back from a hostage release and negotiations?
The United States has been Israel's closest ally since the beginning of this war and for all time. We are really two countries that share enormous morals and values in common. Having said that, Israel is an independent country. And over the last 15 months, there has been a tug of war with our greatest ally. Again, our interests are our interests, and the United States has its own interests, and sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. Israel's been saying from the beginning, both on the political level and on the defense level, that this is the Middle East. When you are negotiating with a terror organization, the only thing that they understand is the language of pressure. Only when Hamas feels that their back is against the wall and they have absolutely no other choice but either to disintegrate and be destroyed or to give back our hostages, only in that situation will our hostages come home. That was the premise for our hostages having come home in November 2023. Hamas was taken absolutely by surprise. Israel entered Gaza with full force. They were so shocked that they gave many of our hostages home, not enough, in order to buy some time. The answer is how Israel's been responding is despite the relationship and despite the pressure, and with gratitude for the arms that are coming in, Israel has been fighting Hamas nonstop. We have never let up fighting Hamas. We are rooting them out in Jabalia, in Khan Yunis, in Gaza City, all throughout the Gaza Strip and Rafah, continuing the pressure because we understand. At the end of the day, we are the ones who have to live with Hamas around the corner. And at the end of the day, these 100 hostages, while they come from many countries around the world, are our responsibility. And therefore, we are listening, but we are acting with our own imperative, which is to push Hamas to the wall until they have no choice but to give up our hostages and bring our people home. Thank you for your questions. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Israel Citizen Spokesperson's Office. This briefing happens every day, 3 p.m. Israel time and 8 a.m. Eastern Coast time. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.